One day in 1933, during the Nazi dictatorship, a man named Otto Rahn received a mysterious anonymous telegram. He was a medievalist, author of several books claiming that the Holy Grail was a real relic. However, luck had never been on his side, and he was on the brink of poverty. The telegram promised him a substantial sum of 1,000 Reichsmarks per month in exchange for dedicating himself to the search for the chalice from which Jesus drank at the Last Supper. The message concluded by asking him to appear at an office in Berlin. Ready to accept the proposal, Rahn went to the specified address, only to be surprised to find that the one who had summoned him was none other than Heinrich Himmler, the leader of the SS. Today, in this new episode, we will tell you everything about the Third Reich's obsession with the occult and the paranormal. To understand this story, we must remember that the Nazis boasted of their passion for knowledge, claiming that their racism had scientific foundations. Let's hear historian Richard Evans talking about this.
Hitler saw world history in terms of the struggle between races for the survival of the fittest, and he thought that races were distinct. So there's an absolute distinction between the Aryan race, by which he basically means the Germans, and the other different races, all of which were inferior in one way or another. The Aryan race were a master race.
Today, it is known that such ideas lack foundation, and racist thinking is based on errors, prejudices, lies, and primarily, hatred. However, Hitler's followers were enthusiasts of all kinds of absurd theories, as long as they corroborated their belief that Germans were destined to rule Europe. Since the early days of National Socialism in the 1920s, the party incorporated occultism into its doctrine. To do this, they drew inspiration from Ariosophy, a set of extravagant ideas claiming that Aryans had been created by an interstellar alien race. These extraterrestrials, called Theozoa, would have given rise to the Germanic peoples through complex experiments with electricity. This distinguished the ancient Aryans from the rest of humanity, which supposedly evolved from apes. The curious tenets of Ariosophy went even further, suggesting that Aryan men possessed magical powers that allowed them to manipulate the forces of nature. However, these astonishing talents were said to have been lost after intermixing with inferior races and diluting their blood. The Nazi leader who fervently believed in these absurdities was Heinrich Himmler, one of Hitler's top lieutenants. In July 1935, Himmler founded the NNRB, a pseudoscientific association whose purpose was to demonstrate to the world the truth of the racial theories on which National Socialism was based. In addition to studying the history of the ancient Germanic peoples, the NNRB had an additional mission, known to few, to replace Christianity with the old pagan religion of the Germans. Here's Christopher Hale, who has written books on the subject, discussing Himmler's ideas.
He despises Christianity. He thinks Christianity weakens people. Above all, according to Himmler, Christianity was essentially Jewish.
Gradually, SS members set aside traditional Christian celebrations, replacing them with somewhat extravagant ones. For example, the day of the birth of the invincible sun was created to be celebrated on December 25th, right in the middle of Christmas. Similarly, Easter was replaced by a tribute to the Germanic fertility goddess. Not only were the holidays eliminated, but the typical church rituals were either annulled or heavily modified. SS officers' marriages began to take place in front of an altar covered by a huge black flag with an S-shaped rune, an ancient symbol of strength and power. When the couple was about to take their vows, Himmler himself approached them and made an offering of bread and salt, representing the earth and fertility in Germanic tradition. Similarly, funerals were conducted in the old-fashioned way, cremating the bodies and placing the ashes in an urn hidden in a circular crypt. Between May 1938 and August 1939, the NNRB funded an expedition to Tibet, although its true objectives remain a subject of speculation. Some argue that Himmler approved it in the hope that scientists would find the missing link, the being that connected Aryans to ancient alien civilizations. He believed this to be the Yeti, a humanoid creature said to inhabit the Himalayas and live in solitude among the snow. However, some historians today claim that the Tibet expedition was not carried out for these fantastic purposes. According to them, the idea that German scientists were looking for the Yeti is Allied propaganda aimed at discrediting the Third Reich. On the contrary, they argue that the Nazi researchers simply wanted to document the fauna and flora of the region. Let's watch a snippet of the footage from the expedition. Joseph Goebbels' Ministry of Propaganda classified it as a mission of secret political and military nature, not to be revealed to the public under any circumstances. Its true purpose may have been to map the area for planning a potential invasion of India, then under British rule. In any case, these are mere speculations, and the only certainty is that Ahnenerbe scientists collected specimens of exotic plants and animals not found in Europe and also measured the skulls of local inhabitants. The eccentricities of National Socialism do not end here. The SS leaders' obsession with the occult reached incredible extremes. In 1933, Himmler signed a 100-year lease for Welsburg Castle, a 17th-century fortress atop a hill in the North Rhine-Westphalia region. His plan was to use it as an SS training center, a place where pagan and occult rituals would be taught. This site was not chosen by chance. In that same region, 2,000 years ago, Germanic tribes defeated the Roman army in an epic battle. Himmler invested large sums of money in the castle and, to give it a more medieval aesthetic, ordered the removal of plaster from the walls and the construction of a moat around it. In fact, he installed a large table inside, referencing King Arthur's Round Table, where only the 12 most important SS officers could sit. Himmler named this place the center of the world and used it to house sacred objects. Despite Hitler's disdain for the Christian religion and his open preference for paganism, he had an unhealthy attraction to its relics. One of them was the famous Spear of Destiny, the weapon that, according to tradition, was used by the Roman soldier Longinus to pierce Jesus' side while he hung on the cross. Although there is no evidence that Adolf Hitler believed in superstitions, there are rumors that he may have shared Himmler's interest in recovering the spear, believing it would grant supernatural powers to destroy the Allies. However, some historians argue that Hitler was not drawn to these relics for their magical abilities but sought to have them on his side for propaganda purposes.
And one of the things that interested the Nazis in the Spear of Destiny was its ancient heritage, that any ruler who is in possession of the spear will be looked kindly upon by the gods.
The supposed Spear of Destiny was stored in the Hofburg Museum in Vienna. Once Hitler conquered Austria and integrated it into the Third Reich, one of his first acts was to move the relic to Nuremberg Fortress. Meanwhile, the leader of the SS had a replica of the weapon made, which he kept in his personal quarters. Heinrich Himmler not only believed in the magic of the Spear of Destiny but was also convinced of the powers of another mythical artifact, Thor's hammer. According to mythology, the Nordic god used his hammer, Mjolnir, to kill the giants threatening his land. Despite his efforts, Himmler never managed to locate the whereabouts of the hammer. This did not stop him from investing state money in similar expeditions, such as the search for the Holy Grail. According to tradition, whoever drank from this cup would receive a blessing from the heavens, consisting of the miraculous healing of all wounds and diseases. Other versions suggested that the Holy Grail granted immortality or could imbue other objects with sacred properties. Here, medievalist Franz Kirchweger tells us more about this.
In the Middle Ages, mentalities were very different from those of today. It was possible to convey the power and the meaning of a relic, an object became holy merely by coming into contact with a real relic.
Himmler's obsession with the mythical chalice led him to associate with Otto Wilhelm Rahn. Born on February 18, 1904, Rahn had been interested in all legends and anecdotes about the Holy Grail since his youth. While studying at university, he became interested in the history of the Cathars, a group of heretics who defied Christianity and were exterminated by the Church in the 13th century. At the same time, he developed a fascination for a medieval poem, Parzival, detailing the adventures of one of King Arthur's knights. The poem refers to a location called Montsalvatch in the Pyrenees as the place where the Holy Grail is hidden. Otto Rahn was convinced that this place was the present-day Montségur in southern France, and the guardians of the sacred chalice were none other than the Cathars. His books were read by Himmler, who offered to finance his wild investigations. As we mentioned at the beginning of this video, one day, an anonymous telegram arrived at Rahn's office, proposing that he embark on the search for the Holy Grail in exchange for 1,000 Reichsmarks per month. When he realized that his sponsor was none other than the leader of the SS, his surprise could not have been greater. Rahn had Jewish ancestry and was openly homosexual, meeting all the requirements to be considered an enemy of the state. However, Himmler's interest in the occult far exceeded his anti-Semitism, so he chose to overlook Rahn's background. On the other hand, Rahn was a staunch opponent of Nazism but set aside his ideals because he urgently needed the money. In 1936, he joined the SS, and shortly afterward, he focused on writing his next work. In 1937, the medievalist published his most famous book, titled The Court of Lucifer, where he proposed that the Holy Grail was a precious stone that had fallen from the crown of the Prince of Darkness, a sacred object in the hands of the Cathars. Let's hear a specialist explain why this book pleased the Nazis so much.
Otto Rahn published a second book called Lucifer's Court in 1937, and there's definitely an anti-Semitic thread where the Cathars are seen as effectively good Aryans fighting the evil Judaic menace of the Church of Rome.
Supposedly, later on, the Church would have seized that stone and invented the story that it was the chalice from which Jesus drank. Otto Rahn believed that the relic was in a monastery in Montserrat. Initially, he conducted archaeological excavations in France, but later continued in diverse locations such as Italy and Iceland. All of this was done with Third Reich money, but the investigations never yielded results. This, coupled with his alcoholism, led to Rahn's downfall. In February 1939, he resigned from the SS and withdrew to live in Languedoc, France, with the goal of leading a low-profile life. However, this is when the greatest mystery of this story unfolds. A few weeks later, on March 13, 1939, Otto Rahn was found lifeless in the Austrian mountains. His body was frozen and upside down. Several empty medicine bottles were found beside him, suggesting that he ingested them to poison himself. To this day, it is impossible to know if he was murdered by the Nazis or if he truly took his own life for fear that his enemies would reveal details of his personal life. In any case, Germany never managed to secure the relics it so desired. In 1940, they stopped searching for the Holy Grail, and soon after, the devastating dynamics of World War II absorbed Hitler entirely. The resources allocated to the occult became increasingly scarce until, finally, the Nazis' obsession with the supernatural died along with the Third Reich. We've reached the end of the video, and we want to ask you, do you think Otto Rahn committed suicide, or was he murdered by the Nazis? Leave your answer in the comments below and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more military events that left their mark on history.